Hi and welcome back to Behind the Screens. I'm Kate Ficai. Today is part 2 of our chat with XR creators Emma Roberts and Ben Andrews. Today we'll hear a bit more about their digital works Stylus and Gondwana and find out more about their creative philosophy and process. Hi Emma and Ben, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
So in our first episode, we talked a little bit about your career pathways and your skills that you use in producing VR work. This time I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of your projects and get into some detail around them. But first of all, I wanted to ask, within the spectrum of XR, there's a saying that 1 + 1 = 3, meaning the response is often more than the sum of its parts. Can you tell us what you mean by this?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So as we kind of have talked about, is that VR is a number of things. It's kind of a device that sits on your head that shows you these kind of frameless stereoscopic images and worlds, but it also, in shutting out the physical world, creates a kind of blindfold. So it has a blindfolding effect, which means that often as an audience or a participant, or even in your own lounge room, what is happening around you is kind of unseen and unseeable. And where it kind of becomes really interesting is in kind of XR, when that, I guess, unseeable aspect of the experience has life and has additional sensory elements, so sound or scent or wind or heat. Often that audience member, by not kind of being able to actually see that and locate it and to understand it, experiences it in a very different, somewhat augmented way. So for example, audiences can leave from the headset or the experience and describe a whole range of smells that they smelled that weren't actually there, but there were scents in the space, but the audience members that kind of completed this kind of array of sensations in a kind of a unique and kind of curious way.
Yeah, one example that we always I think demonstrates this really well is wind. If Ben is in the headset, I could just be going kind of wafting him with my hand and he will be feeling like there's a strong breeze. It's really interesting what your brain does to kind of fill in the gaps between when you can't see what's giving you this sensory input. It's almost like it becomes enhanced and really exciting and exhilarating and experiential, and that's really interesting.
And it's what allows the experiences to be both kind of high tech and really lo-fi, but for the audiences, because when you've got the headset on, you can't see the fact that there might be ushers around you kind of moving slight elements or with the kind of chopping board giving wind, is that they can't actually see the kind of lo-fi playground that it kind of actually resembles on the outside.
It's really funny on the outside, but it feels really good on the inside. So Starless was a natively designed location-based VR experience. So we wanted to create an experience that could only be experienced as the location-based work. It didn't make sense by itself in the headset. It didn't make sense by itself in physical space, but together they perfectly were in dialogue all the time. So we worked with a team of neuroscientists for that experience to look at the phenomenon of near-death out-of-body experiences and these archetypical ways that people have of talking about that experience. We latched onto 3 particular elements of those: the feeling of leaving the body, the walk towards the light, and the reluctance to return to the physical self. And we wanted to create an experience that would make people feel that physically, to go through that journey of those 3 elements. We used a lot of really interesting techniques from simple multisensory inputs. So you started off in kind of a floating cloud world. We had people on swings in these floating egg chairs that gave you this really strong sense of being weightless, with wind and scent and an immersive soundscape, but then started to up the ante and break people out of that world as they actually physically walk towards the light. We used a lot of sensory incongruity, which is where the sensations that you were feeling in your body, like heat and texture underfoot, weren't matching what you were seeing, which does these really interesting things to the brain. And really activates and wakes you up and gives you this incredibly exciting feeling, and then let people loose in this exploratory space at the end where they could actually see through the headset. It was very experimental. It used a lot of multidisciplinary elements, from sound to immersive theatre to the neuroscience element as well, virtual reality, and visual design. And had this incredible audience response that were really blown away by. And it's still a very memorable experience, I think, for us as creators.
As you know, I was lucky enough to be an audience member at Starlis, and one of the things that really struck me was that you actually had lighting and set design, and I guess going into it thinking of it as a purely VR experience. I wondered if you could share with us why you do that.
Yeah, so we do have some extra bells and whistles in our work, and we always consider our work as taking place across physical space, virtual space, and a hybrid space. So you always enter into a space, obviously, without a headset on, and therefore setting atmosphere, setting mood, setting, I guess, a kind of ritualistic aspect to it, to kind of bring audiences into the right headspace. And for Starless, we were exhibiting in a warehouse in Kensington that was quite hard to find, and we kind of were quite cognizant there's going to be a lot of audiences that are probably running late, got a little bit lost.
They've just come from work. They just were on the tram and someone was rude.
And for a work like this, where we'd put a lot of development into it, we really wanted to create this kind of sublime kind of awe experience that we really want to curate that opening. So we actually allow, before the headset even arrives, audiences to actually start to kind of calm down, to relax, to kind of enter into the kind of like a sensory state that is conducive, I guess, to what kind of comes next. So the pre-VR spaces are designed, and then the post-VR spaces are designed as well, and that's where the headset kind of comes off, and you kind of take the headset, you remove the headset from your eyes, and there's this kind of experience of re-emergence or re-entering into the physical world. And for us, we never want that physical world to just simply be what was there beforehand, but to be somewhat connected to what you were in the virtual space, or to kind of emphasize this sense that when you were in that virtual world, the space around you is kind of transformed and changed, often kind of emphasizing this sense of kind of wonder. So, you know, there's this kind of feeling that that the world around you couldn't be what you expected, or that it's really kind of different. With the headset on, there's also like these kind of realms of spatial illusion. So as the blindfold kind of shuts out the space, it also allows a kind of choreography of spaces to change and to kind of be plastic and theatrical. And that is often designed around the kind of experiential arc. So with the near-death experience of Starlis, that sense of kind of taking off the headset is really kind of one of almost rebirth and kind of like... and kind of, emerging back into the world. And for us, having...
We didn't want people to emerge back into, like, a conference room.
Yeah, that it's kind of gentle, and that... and we find, you know, the more that we've worked in this kind of field, that environments are really crucial. Like, the context in which you experience VR is really, really important. It's very important to be very sensitive to everything that you're bringing into the space. The feeling of the space is very pertinent within your virtual experience. And even though you might be looking at something different, you're still smelling, you're still feeling the atmosphere or the kind of temperature of the room. And for us, it's about bringing all of those things always together. So you're never experiencing them kind of separately, but always... It's a kind of a product of all of these kind of components put together. We knew we were creating something quite powerful, but I suppose we didn't actually like the kind of power and the consistency of the work was something that really exceeded, I guess, our expectations. And one of the kind of key, I suppose, reflections that we had coming out of Starless is that we created this, you know, this moment in which audiences, often 4 strangers, or sometimes 2 friends and 2 other friends, because there was four at a time, and seeing how in that kind of post space where you did write down the feedback, a lot of people just sat around and kind of were connected by this kind of experience that they had together, and because everyone's experience of these things is so different and so varied and so unique and personal, that we found that a lot of audiences were actually just wanting to sit and chat and connect and to learn more about one another. And for us, it was around, all right, how do we now that we're starting to understand how to kind of create this, this state of connection and reconnection,
and awe and wonder
in a quite, profound
and profound way
and potent way. How do we channel that experience so it's not just around what I reached out and touched, or what I saw, or what I kind of felt within the experience of the light, but is to do with something that we're really passionate about, which is climate change.
Yeah, so we decided to create a work, or conceive of a work that took those philosophies and that way of working and leveraged it towards something, which is our new project, Gondwana. Gondwana started off as a durational experience of climate change. We were really interested in that feeling you get when you're immersed in like awe-inspiring nature, first and foremost, particularly like in, for example, like a huge torrential downpour, when you like surrounded by this like incredible energy and power of the natural world in this really privileged way. That's something that I've always really connected with. And so we conceived of a work, again, because we like to push the boundaries, of creating a durational experience that ran on a 10-minute loop of steadily worsening weather, to kind of map the impact of climate change and the data that we always hear about and everyone knows, in a way that feels lived and felt, using multi-sensory elements to bring the storms to life and to bring the natural world to life as well. The first thing that we had to do was decide on the environment that we were going to set this piece in. And we were really lucky to get some support from Screen Australia to travel to the Daintree rainforest in far north Queensland, which we didn't really know anything about. I am definitely a cold weather person. I've never wanted to go to like the tropical rainforest. Didn't really interest me, but we were both really blown away by what we learnt from the scientists that we were working with up there and indigenous elders as well. The Daintree is the oldest tropical rainforest in the world. It's 180 million years old. And it's just this like incredible or like living museum. Our friend from the Wet Tropics Management Authority really loves to say it's this living museum of 180 million years of the world's history. It's potentially the origin point of songbirds. It's got all these wild species like cassowaries and these crazy plants and all sorts of things. So we were really like, I've had just the most incredible experience traveling up there. We've gone up there a lot now since then.
Can you tell us a little bit about durational work as a new approach and why this is your chosen format for a piece about climate change?
So we were always attracted towards kind of a different way of exhibiting a piece about climate change that kind of allows one to connect with it both personally, but also has the kind of temporal element of the kind of, I guess, like the wider time scale always at play. And for us, initially, before we had to kind of start to rethink it due to COVID-19, it was about allowing audiences to both come for this kind of beautiful experience of the storm and kind of, that there was going to be wind and mist and like
heat
it was
and scent
and all of the wonderful things. And the idea was we wanted people to kind of come for that, ecstatic, heightened, intensified experience that made you feel really wondrous and alive. But we wanted people to kind of want to come back and to experience how it's actually changing. So you have this kind of dual aspect to the experience where one is of wonder and the other is kind of starting to learn to see how within the kind of wonder, like time is changing, and time in the kind of in the context of the work is moving forward through these kind of really terrible projections of how this incredible ecosystem might kind of change and change permanently. So always from the beginning, it was about having a work that had these kind of dual, I guess, layers to it. And when COVID-19 happened and it became very clear that physical installations, location-based XR, VR, is the part of the industry that has really, really suffered, of an industry generally that suffers a little bit because of the hygiene and accessibility issues. But the installation side of things is really, it's going to take a little while to recover. We kind of realized, all right, well, the physical installation side of things, we love it. What it gives to the experience is incomparable. It can't be recreated just in the home, but let's start to explore this durational element in a kind of a different way. So we were kind of logistically bound beforehand to having about an 8-hour window of exhibition. So over 8 hours is how the environment changes. Whereas not having the kind of constraints of, I guess, platforms, galleries, museums that will actually exhibit or host this work. And because it can now exist kind of online or digitally, it actually opens up some really interesting kind of elements to the experience that we previously didn't have. And one of those is a 24-hour window in which the environment is actually changing over a longer, slower time frame. But it actually is a lot more accessible than a physical installation because audiences from South America or from Africa or from Europe can all kind of log in at different parts of the day because everyone's got different time zones, and that the work is kind of like slowly unfolding over that kind of period of time that allows the work to still remain kind of an event. So it still is only active for that 24-hour window, and then it will kind of close down for a little while and then kind of reactivate. So there is a kind of finite aspect to when you can kind of enter into the rainforest and kind of experience it, what like the wonder of it, but also how it's changing. But we're really, really, really interested in this kind of aspect of the durational work now, where audiences from all around the world can log in at different points in time, given their time zone, or wanting to just kind of track it, in their own way, and actually experience, this quite complex way that the environment is changing.
Yeah, it's about experiencing a work that you can't fully understand. And I think that metaphor for climate change of us having to plant a seed that we're never going to bear fruit from, and think about the natural world at the speed of the natural world rather than this very quick human timescale that we have is something that works really well in this new online version.
So in terms of, you've obviously got a personal investment in climate change awareness, and it sounds like that's what's driven you to kind of create the work, the Gondwana work. So what are you hoping what impact will that have? What do you hope your audiences will take away from this experience?
Yeah, I think it's really important for us with this experience to have, I think we want people to gain a different way of looking at the world and looking at the natural world in particular, particularly when it comes to those timescales. But we're also really interested in giving people a privileged experience of being immersed in nature. And that's something that is all too rare, particularly now when the daintree, for example, is an area that is literally inaccessible to anyone outside of Queensland. If Queensland, for a long time, it was completely shut off because it's home to a remote indigenous community, the Gugu people. And so being able to give people this opportunity to feel small and connected in the natural world is something that we then want them to extend into their own everyday lives. So learning to see, learning to be still and to watch over different timescales and start to learn about, even if it is just the way the flowers in your backyard or that tree on the nature strip has its own cycles, is something that's really key with the experience for us.
Was that something that you really took from your discussions with the Indigenous elders? I guess, did you change the way you were approaching the work based on the time you spent with them?
Yeah, we were incredibly lucky to work with two Indigenous elders up in Daintree, Uncle Ray Pierce and Uncle Mick Gulka, who took us out on country, and we spent 2 nights on their country camping and listening to stories. And I think in as much as like a lot of the, I guess, fundamentals of the experience were already in place at that point, one thing that really, like that experience really solidified for us, and we're still in contact with Uncle Mick. Uncle Ray has unfortunately passed away since then, but the two of them have really cemented this idea of being able to see the rainforest as this sentient thing, and that's something that is so clear in any conversation that you have with them, is that the daintree is a very much a living, sentient, conscious thing, and that is their mother, and has these incredible cycles and nuances, and they have this inherent understanding of that. And that's something that, in as much as we're still learning about their way of seeing the forest and being within it, we hope that this experience gestures towards that way of experiencing the natural world.
So I understand 2021 will be when we'll see Gondwana, and I really look forward to that. But before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about Jump Blue, your new project.
Yeah, so Jump Blue is our first narrative work that we've ever created. It is based on a BBC audio drama called Jump Blue, which stars Fiona Shaw, who some people might know from Fleabag and Harry Potter, and she's in Killing Eve. It's based around the experience of free diving, which is diving without equipment. You just dive on one breath, and one really incredible thing that happens when we do that is that the second that water hits anyone's face, this is innate within all humans, our bodies activate this thing called the mammalian dive reflex, and basically our body goes, "Oh, I remember how to do this. We used to be a fish," and your heart rate will drop by 25%, your breathing rate will drop similarly. The deeper you go, the stronger those effects go. You basically become this incredible hybrid human underwater creature. For example, heart rates of free divers, they can dive hundreds of meters down into the ocean on this one breath, have been logged as low as 7 beats per minute, which is, wow, on the land that wouldn't support
almost dead.
Yeah. But somehow deep in the ocean, you can still be conscious and moving, and that's just incredible. But so the experience is based around this woman called Natalia Molchanova, who was a Russian freediver. She began freediving when she was 40 years old as a hobby after a divorce. She was like, my kids have moved out, I need something to do. And became a world champion freediver. So she held 41 world records. She liked to break them on her birthday to show other women that age didn't limit them.
Love her.
So great. But in 2015, on a routine dive, she disappeared, and no one's ever seen her again.
The countdown is complete. A little duck dive. And you're in. 10 hard kicks. 90 beats per minute. The cold water triggers the mammalian dive reflex. Humans have the same reflex as seals. 75 beats per minute. We are not designed to stay on the land. This is your second home. This is your home. 55 beats per minute. The alarm from your watch at 20 meters. You don't need it. 40 beats per minute. Now you are heavier than the water, so you are just going to fall. Open your eyes. There he is. Beautiful. Fuzzy blueness.
So Jump Blue tells the story of two of Natalia's most famous or infamous dives, her world record dive to 101 meters on one breath, and her final descent. And it's this incredible as an audio piece. It's a BBC radio drama, incredibly immersive audio piece by itself. And we were really interested in how we can create a VR experience that that allows people to virtually dive with Natalia to reach those depths.
Yeah, so that's a breath responsive, interactive experience, and hopefully with 2021 there's a vaccine and we can kind of get back to creating some installation based, because we would love for that work to also kind of be a performance based work.
Something you can experience in the home and something you can experience in an exhibition.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be absolutely phenomenal, and I wish you all the best with both finishing and delivering Gondwana, but also developing Jump Blue. Sorry, it sounds incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your projects and your knowledge and your pathways so far. It's been illuminating.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kate. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
Okay. See ya.
Bye.
See ya.
To hear more from Ben and Emma and other leading screen professionals, don't forget to head to the ACMI YouTube channel and watch the full Behind the Screen series and Running Free series. And don't forget to subscribe.